Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to a public meeting and public hearing designed to provide information and receive input on the Town of Greenwich's 2016-17 capital budget. This is a meeting of the First Selectman's Capital Improvement Programs Project Committee. Before I formally begin the meeting and go into an overview, I just want to take a moment for a couple of announcements. The first announcement is that the programmer for Greenwich Community Television has advised us that our electronic devices interfere with the recording equipment. So if you do come up to speak, or if anyone on the panel can, trying to include myself in that, keep them away from the mics because they interfere with the frequency. So that's just a point of information. The second thing I just want to take an opportunity, since I have a captive audience, is that, as you know, we are anticipating a weather event over the weekend. And we received several bulletins here at the town through the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. We are part of Connecticut Region 1. And while they are forecasting light to moderate snowstorm over the weekend, beginning on Saturday, they anticipate much higher snowfall in southern Connecticut, and particularly are concerned in watching for coastal flooding. So we will begin to formulate news releases to go out. Clearly, everyone I think here tends to follow weather, but I wanted to give you the most up-to-date notice that we are going to be monitoring for coastal flooding. Our conservation director has done some quick estimates, and we need to just keep an eye on it, given it's a full moon. The lunar cycle, it's all coming together. So I take that moment to give you that little weather bulletin before we begin tonight's formal program. As a way of introduction, the First Selectman's Capital Improvement Programs Projects Committee is an ad hoc committee that was established by the town well over a decade, and it's designed to really provide support to the First Selectman, who has charter responsibility or authority in the charter to present a consolidated capital budget for the town. The members of the committee have been fairly consistent throughout its existence, and I'm going to take a moment to introduce them to you if you're not familiar. To my right is our Commissioner of Public Works, Amy Siebert. To her right is the Director of Parks and Recreation, Mr. Joseph Siciliano, and to his right is Mr. Chip Haslen. And Mr. Haslen is a representative of the Greenwich Library Board of Trustees. And the reason that the Library Board of Trustees is represented here is that they are one of the several Town of Greenwich, what we refer to as appointing authorities. So separate entities that run various services within the town. Prior to his service, we had the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a number of years, who also represented that enterprise. So that is a variable slot that is changed at the discretion of the First Selectman. To my left is Mr. Jim Rickey. He is the Managing Director of Operations for the Greenwich School System. He is here in place of Dr. Bill McCursey, who sits as a standing member. We have Mrs. Katie DeLuca, who is our town planner, and the town planner also serves as an integral part of this ad hoc advisory committee. And finally, we have Peter Minarski, who is the town's chief financial officer, referred to as controller, and he is a permanent member of the committee. In addition, in the audience, there are several senior town staff and Board of Ed staff who support this process, who are an integral part of it. We have Mr. Ben Branyon, who's the town administrator. We have Miss Melissa Jones, who is senior management analyst. And both of them, from the town side, work in concert with departments, with the finance department, in formulating the town department's development of their operating and capital budgets. In addition, I see in the audience representatives from the school's administration. For facilities, I see Mr. Ron Matten is here. Ron, thank you. And I can't clear the podium to see. But we certainly thank you for your contributions along with the rest of your colleagues over at Havmeyer. I also want to just point out in the audience, which if probably went through it, everyone falls into an assignment of some sort, but I'm going to be just overview. We have with us the BET, several members of the BET. I note we have with us the newly appointed Budget Committee, which is being chaired by Mr. James Lash. Also, along with us this evening is Mrs. Tarkington, Mrs. Kiernan, and Mr. Raymer. I see Mrs. Oberlander, who's on the board, and any other BET member. If you could, and Mrs. Moriarty, if you could just stand up for those who are new, who may not know who you are. These are the members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation who will be playing an integral part in this process after February 1st. Think of it as, I think it as a ball toss. Irf is the coach, as he likes. The ball is in our hands now. Come February 1st, we pass the ball to the BET, and then ultimately it's passed to the RTM. And in that vein, I'd ask any of the RTM members, I see several of you, but I don't want to exclude anybody. So those who sit on the RTM presently, if you could please stand so we can see the representation. Great, thank you. I did fail to point out that as well as the voting members of this committee, we have included several what we call non-voting members. I did that during my tenure to bring the RTM, the Board of Ed, and the BET closer to the process. I know for the RTM, we have Mr. Porter and Mr. Ozmir as the two delegates who are representing the RTM. From the BET, I believe it's Mrs. Moriarty and Mr. Mason, correct? And from the Board of Ed, it's Mrs. Erickson. Tonight, the Board of Ed is holding a meeting at 7 o'clock, so naturally, Laura could not be here, but she's been an integral part of the meetings that led up to tonight's hearing. So copies of the draft 2016 capital budget are available from staff, and they're also conveniently found on the Town of Greenwich website. So to give you a sense what that is, there's a document that looks like this. This is inclusive of all of the capital requests for the current year, as well as the next 14 years, which when you look at this, recognize and understand that these are the town and the school administration's best estimate as to what they perceive to be costs associated with future capital outlays. It is in no doubt cast in stone, and it is no doubt likely, highly likely, to change due to the fact that 5 years from now, who knows where we'll be. I mean, in terms of life changes, and so this is designed to be just that, the judgment as of today, what we anticipate based upon the facilities and equipment that we presently utilize. So this is the document that we've based our process off of, which is backed up by this document, which includes for each project a project information sheet, which provides the project description, statement of need. It also is inclusive of looking at what prior year's expenditures were allocated for that particular project, as well as, again, what we anticipate for future years. So this is also part of it. As I mentioned earlier, we have operation plans for each department. Operational plans are a requirement that are stipulated in the town charter provision. Each department is required to produce one. Ideally, those operation plans should validate the proposed expenditure of operating and capital dollars. So they give you an overview of what those departments are, how many people they have, and what services they provide. And last but not least, there's the existing year's budgets that's been approved. In many respects, you can look at this as a point of departure for this journey in developing the next year's budget, because so much is a continuation of the of the process. So the final capital budget will be determined, the final that's submitted to the BET will be determined upon completion of this hearing and with my consultation with this committee and all the various stakeholders that we've been working with. In addition to those I mentioned, we work closely with neighborhood associations. I see Vin DeMarco here, and I see Greenwich.
He's right behind Vin.
Yes, nice to see you. So, and I know there's others who have had ongoing discussions with town officials, have been here in prior years on specific projects of interest to their neighborhoods, and so we thank them. So we'll be having conversations there. The development of the capital budget is not done in isolation of the other parts of the budget. So we spend considerable time working with the town departments to review their annual operation plans, as well as their operating budgets. As of today, the operating budgets for the town, as well as the Board of Education, are within the range that the BET has outlined in their guidelines. The town's operating increase for 16-17 is just below 2%, and the schools are just about at 2%. So when you put the two together, we're at 2%, and I might add that that is inclusive on the town side of the first year of additional staffing for the fire department, which is 4 firefighters that approximately have an all-in cost, salary, in benefits and so forth, of about $104,000. So just to give you the context of where we are. The fixed charges continue to be the focal point for our town. So fixed charges is inclusive of things like contributions for employee health care, the costs associated with funding the annual required contribution to our pension fund, that's the defined benefit fund, as well as our other post-employment benefit fund. This year, we are aware of the need to allocate greater amounts of funding to our risk fund, where we anticipate the need to address several matters of pending litigation. And the town has a system, a policy whereby we're insured for $1 million and above. So we have, generally, when you see headlines screeching that the town settled a $6 million lawsuit or a $2 million lawsuit, the town is responsible for the first $1 million. The insurance covers the balance. Needless to say, that's not to sit easy for us, because those settlements ultimately affect our premiums. So we work diligently through the BET, the RTM claims, to evaluate and assign the risk exposure to this and budget accordingly. So this proposed budget, which frankly is represented presently on this draft piece of paper, is going to allocate an additional $500,000 to that fund over what was initially forecast to anticipate potential settlement. Finally, we are acutely aware of the issues facing our healthcare system and cost structures affected by federal and state reimbursements. The town of Greenwich is now the only municipality operating a skilled nursing facility. The 2016-17 budget as in draft addresses closing the current and proposed fiscal year shortfalls at the Nathaniel Witherell Skilled Nursing Facility. Just to give you a magnitude of those dollars, we are looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.6. Ben, is that 5.4? Yeah. Yeah. So in cumulative, we're looking at well over $5 million, though, to close current and future year projected shortfalls. And again, as I said, that's predicated on looking at their census, type of patients they have. Some of them are long-term, which are generally those supported by Medicaid, and we lose money on those residents. And then there's the self-pay, and there's the short-term patients who get Medicaid we get Medicare reimbursement for. So I share this with you because that actually has a very big impact on this budget, and one that's going to consume a considerable amount of time, not only has it consumed our time, but the Nathaniel Witherell Board, who's a 9-member board, an appointing authority, and of course the BET and the RTM. I put a plug out for the Nathaniel Witherell Board. We are in the process of looking for 3 board members. That's 3. That's 1/3 of the board in the next month. So if any of you are either interested or know of someone who's interested in serving on this very critical board at a very important time, who have a financial acumen, who understand organizational management, financial management, please let us know. We have a committee that identifies and recruits people called Selectmen's Nomination Advisory Committee, but I use this as an opportunity to ask you to help us find the right people to oversee what we consider to be a very valued service in the town. Finally, the budget also includes the annual increase of $3 million to the capital non-recurring fund to support the capital plan, and relies upon the town's fund balance to offset these fixed cost increases and stabilize the mill rate to the level that we deem modest and predictable and palatable to all taxpayers. So simply stated, through the stewardship and management of the dollars that you paid to the town and that the fiduciaries approved to be spent, the town accrues savings through management, and that savings is referred to as fund balance. Fund balance is used traditionally to offset future year increases. The bottom line is we've had very healthy fund balances. I think it's attributable to, across the town, schools, solid management, good budgeting that's overseen by the RTM, and knock on wood, we're fortunate we're able to use those resources to offset these increases. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that that's desirous long term, because we don't know what other external factors could influence us. But at the present moment, we're in a position to do that. And I think we have to be astute to know that that's not a sustainable trend based upon our economic environment, what's happening at the state and federal levels. So that is why our focus and attention is going to be on these issues that are, again, systemic: healthcare, the Nathaniel Witherell, balancing the capital plan, and continue to make improvements in our operating departments to run more efficiently. So hopefully that gives you a context for tonight's hearing, which is, again, on capital, but recognizing capital is 1/3 of the piece of the overall town budget. We will gladly take comments now. Just to give you a sense, I run as a more informal hearing in that I'm not going to sit here with a stopwatch, because I have great sense that this is a very well-informed and attuned audience, and we are interested in hearing what you have to say. So I'll leave it in your bailiwick to know when you think you've gotten your point across, if there's someone teed up, and we're all ears. So the first speaker this evening on the list, and there should be a sheet back there if you're interested in speaking. If we get to the point where I have no names on a sheet, I'm just going to ask people, if you're interested, raise your hand, and we'll go from there. So don't be bashful. This is designed to foster discussion amongst us in here in the town and understand what your thinking is about all this. So Vin DeMarco from the Pembroke Glenville Association, and Vin is a long-time RTM member, now as head of a neighborhood association, would like to speak about the Pembroke Road sidewalk, Pembroke Park access, and the stormwater master plan. So welcome. Is it on?
I don't think your microphone's on.
Let me say that again. Okay. Thank you, Peter, and everyone on the board for the opportunity. I'm not the head of the Pembroke Glenville Association presently. For this year, I'm again, the Communications Director, and I'm the Vice Chairman. Our chairman is Andrea Bloom here. If she'd like to come up, she can stand next to me if she has any comments, but I think she trusts me, I think. Anyway, so let me go on with the first item, which is really the most important item to our community. As I spoke last time about that, I think that was the first public hearing, and at that time, if I'm not mistaken, the draft recommendations were not published. I assume it was not considered a draft recommendation. It was draft, but it wasn't considered the first selectman's recommendations. Is that correct? Was this published after that hearing?
That was reflective of everything that the departments had submitted
Right.
for consideration and had been finessed through the town administration as to the BET's perspective. So one of
Okay.
the points I didn't mention was that, the BET has stipulated, don't come and ask for additional funds if you have funds currently appropriated that have not been expended or encumbered. So encumbered means you've given me $100,000, I told you I needed it to buy something, and it's sitting in my bank account, I haven't even gone out shopping and put in a purchase order yet. And yet I'm gonna come to you and say, give me another $100,000. So that's a simplified analogy, that's what they're looking at. So I think we may have had a little bit of a influence on it, but to your point, what you have today is a much further refined and ranked in the categories of new projects and upgrades. So this is definitely a more refined document.
Okay. Okay, that was the point I wanted to make, was that, so something happened between that hearing and tonight.
Right,
Okay.
there was ranking, I should have said that the rankings of new projects and upgrades. In addition, the projects have been defined by us in several categories: new projects, upgrades, ongoing initiatives, replacements, and maintenance. And the focal point of ratings was on new projects and upgrades, recognizing that maintenance is something we do every year. We have many different programs within the schools and the town that fund so much to maintain roofs and so forth, carpeting. And there's no sense sitting here checking off someone we know we should do it, because when we don't, we're borrowing against our assets. So thank you for bringing that up, because I missed that point. So,
Okay, well, what was important to me and to be able to communicate to our constituents in the Pembroke Glenville area as to what's going on with that project. Is it in, or, are they going to go for it? Well, we know we have a long way to go yet. So as a result, I didn't put out the red alert to get the whole community here. I've been to those meetings. It's typically the BET meeting, public hearing, where the Board of Education takes over. But in any case, so we'll try to get many more people to understand that they have to be here for that. But rest assured that in the meantime, so we have information now that, okay, so it's a little bit further in the process, and it seems to be sailing along. But that's the only information that we've had since then. So the information I want to bring to you is that we have further indications of support from more and more people all the time for that particular project. We had a community meeting, our biannual meeting last night. Katie was going to speak. She was going to be our special guest speaker last night. But we did have a speaker. Actually, we had two real estate agents come to us to speak about the value of real estate and what do people come to town looking for. We all know that they're attracted because Greenwich is a very safe town. It's got wonderful, not only public school system, but many private schools. So people come initially looking at that. They know there's amenities, but when they go to look for an area to live in, what are they looking for? Well, the real estate agent last night and others we've spoken to say we drive them around and they want to see where the parks are. They want to see where the recreation is. They want to look at the infrastructure. So the two items that I want to speak about that bring value to our community and will bring even more value when we make the improvements are the Pemberwick sidewalk, the completion of the Pemberwick sidewalk. I guess we should probably say that because the piece we're looking for really is going to extend the sidewalk all the way from Pemberwick, from the Post Road, beginning of Pemberwick, all the way through into Glenville. So it'll knit together those two communities in a way it never has been, and provide access to Pemberwick Park for people north of the park and also west of the river. So you all know that, but you may not realize also that the playground is not. I think most of you know this, but for sake of the public, the playground is not accessible by wheelchair or by stroller presently. So the first phase, which is in this year's budget, the funding for it in this year's budget, of course, that's the piece that the key piece that we'd like to see done. It's only 100 or a little more than 100 feet long, apparently. That would extend to the back of the playground, so that the sidewalk would allow people to actually push a stroller or a wheelchair to the back entrance and be able to get into the playground without climbing steps. So that's the real important piece that we're looking for in this budget. And of course, the second two phases would continue that sidewalk all the way down to Comley Avenue and put the whole thing together. And that then will allow everyone in the community access, pedestrian access, safe pedestrian access to that park and playground. So it's extremely important to our community that this project gets done as soon as possible. Young people are already moving in. People moving in now, but this is going to add an even greater amount of safety and more value, and of course that means more tax dollars. So the town should be willing to do this as soon as possible. So the other piece that sort of ties into that, the other project that I would love to see, we all would love to see finished, and it really came as news to me that it isn't complete yet. The last piece of the stormwater master plan for the Byram River, it'd be in this year's budget. Would actually allow the town to fund its I think obligation for its share of the Army Corps of Engineers work, so that we would finally be able to say to the people in the flood zone, at least, here are your options. This is what we have. And that's extremely important because, as even our real estate agent told us last night, one of them told us last night that they've had many people say to them, well, what about the river? Because they all know that there's flooding in that area when we have an occasional bad nor'easter. So that's extremely important, and it would certainly add even more value for people to understand what it's all about. And at that time, I would assume that maybe property values are going to go so high we'll all have to move out. But whatever. So I really appreciate if you think long and hard about both those projects, or things that should be completed this year, and then we can move forward. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Ben. Just another reference that is in this document that was not there before, and it was requested by me to be put there so that the public can see, when you look at this document and you look at those projects that are defined by us as considered to be new projects or upgrades, meaning improvements that are perhaps providing something equal or greater to, it's just shy of $6 million. But what the staff did for me, and I wanted you all to see, is that those particular projects, while all worthy of consideration, are the seeds for future expenditures of larger sums. So in many respects, they tend to be the initial funding to do either feasibility or architectural engineering for a community identified needs. So when you look at that page 4 on summary capital schedules, know you're looking at a refinement of those things that are in those two categories that, if advanced, are likely to be seeding or paving the way for future commitment to do what is designed. And so when you take those figures down at the bottom, you're looking at another $52 million cumulative for 4 years. So you can play around with it and figure out how much it is a year, but I just bring your attention to it because time and attention was devoted to highlighting that fact. Because we've heard in past years, well, wait a minute, we thought it was only going to be this amount. When did that come from? This is the seedling, so focus on that, and if you want to spend time on it, that's where I would direct you. The next speaker is Sil Pecora. Sil is a member of our TM District 3, and he's to talk about Department of Public Works.
Thank you, Peter. I wanted to, the last 2 years, we've been denied a project that's down at the transfer station. It's a sanitary sewer line that traverses the property that needs repair and upgrade. This funding request is for stormwater detention basin construction, pond dredging, relocation of the fueling station, and landscaping improvements necessary upon completion of the sanitary sewer work. This is a very important part of the master plan to get it done. We've been denied it for 2 years, and we expect it to pass this year. I met with our district, and everybody is in favor of it, and they want to make sure that this part of it is taken care of, and we hope that you spend a little more time on the master plan overall for the transfer station, because that is needed also. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sil. Peter Quigley, Stormwater Drainage. Good evening, welcome, Mr. Quigley.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Tessie, and thank you all for allowing me to say a few comments. Not to drift too far for the few times I've been here over the years, I'm surprised that Vinny didn't mention the harbors and the coastal areas as one of the reasons that people come to buy homes in Greenwich. I've been 3 terms a member of the RTM, and during that time, I have spent a great deal of time on water management. I was appointed a water management point person for the RTM land use. For those people that don't know me, I've been off of RTM for 2 years, and thanks to Mr. Tessie, he has appointed me to the Harbor Commission. So I've studied the water management issues from a strategic standpoint. I am a student. I am not an expert. I keep being told I'm not an expert. I've been trying to connect dots in an overall issue of water management for the town of Greenwich. Commissions and departments all do their thing, and they do them very well, but sometimes there's not an overall strategy or connection of the dots. So the 3 terms in RTM gave me a land use perspective, and where does all the water flow? That is correct, into the harbors and the coastal areas. So I've got 2 years now of the new Harbor Commission, developing a new harbor plan. I'm not here to talk about money for the Harbor Commission. We need a new plan, and if the plan's developed, I think we'll be able to take care of our own funding through user fees, interestingly. We may be one of the few departments to try to run a commission without having to ask for taxpayer funds, except maybe for dredging. We're not sure about that. That's a big issue. So that may be a capital suggestion over the terms. But I'm here tonight basically to talk about how good a job it appears the town is doing in stormwater management, to educate the audience too that, as Ms. Siebert keeps talking to me, stormwater drainage systems are very separate from the sanitary sewer systems. You need 2 running parallel so that the system that's in place, the sewer system, isn't taking the overflow from stormwater and then creating additional capacity problems in the sewers that affect the sewers, okay? So I annually bring your attention to a study that was approved by the RTM, initiated by actually one of the people here on the BET, to the tune of about $1.2 million. It came up with a final summary now 4 years ago, I think. CDM, Camp Dresser McKee, provided their summary and their estimates. I keep bringing this up. The estimates at that time were in the neighborhood of $200 million to sort of fix, repair, construct new stormwater drainage systems. If people in this room don't understand that, there is a copy of this floating around. I'm happy to leave it with Mr. Tessie, but I'm pretty sure you're pretty knowledgeable of this. And I'm here to say that I think you're addressing the issues. the big question, is it enough? You are attacking all some of the major issues here. I posted them. The Holly Hill improvement stormwater system appears to be a priority of the Public Works. Church Street and Sound Beach and Strickland all seem to be targeted, which are all very important areas, choke points. But that overall estimate was for $200 million 3 years ago. Do you need to plan maybe twice as much as what's in the CIP? And that's the question I have. Does the DPW have enough funds? I won't ask her for that because she's probably been asking for funds. But I think that's what you should be looking at. Infrastructure, before you build on top of the land, is what is running under the land. So water management isn't just for flood. Water management is for the quality of water that flows when it rains. Water quality is what happens when there are droughts and when the land is built over and you have no holding tanks or storage areas for clean water and quality water. You're starting to hear quite a bit on the environment and quality water. Certainly what's going on in Michigan and Flint, if you're not aware of that, is becoming very serious issues on water quality. So a water management plan is important. You are addressing the various neighborhoods and parts. I thank many of us thank you. Do you need more money is really the question at hand here, and to take a good look at that. I can't tell because you have the project so diverted here, and that's to your CIP complexity. But it does appear you're taking the steps. I applaud you. Thank you. Probably will still be up here talking about issues, but I think you're taking good steps here. Thank you. I think you need more funding, though, is what I'm basically saying tonight.
Great, thank you, Mr. Quigley.
Thank you.
Roger and Julia Pisani. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. I rise to speak on behalf of the Eastern Greenwich Civic Centre. It seems to be, was it 5 years since I was here doing that, and you very kindly, ladies and gentlemen, gave us funding for the new roof, which has been a huge success. And the Civic Centre has been continuing to provide services for old people, young people, mostly the people in the town who don't have the access to join a posh private club. We hear that we do have some money in the budget to think about redeveloping the Civic Centre, and I hope that we can do that in a sensible manner, exhibiting common sense, and we would like to know, ordinary people like my husband and me, how we can be part of the planning process so that we design a building when this happens, if it happens, that is suitable for the needs and that it doesn't get out of hand into a posh private club. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Betsy Underhill to speak to the Eastern Civic Center as well.
Good evening. This is not my forte here, but I am just one of these small people that happen to get involved at the Eastern Civic Center as well. As this lovely woman spoke, I introduced a sport to it, and I needed to find a place to play, and have utilized both our civic centers, Western and Eastern, with this new sport. It has grown tremendously. It hits all levels of ages. It's a fantastic sport. It's the first time I've actually been involved in the Eastern Civic Center as a town person that's lived here for 33 years. And I'm just very impressed with the facility, even though I know it's broken down and I know it has problems, and I know I've been hearing rumblings that it was going to get torn down. And of course, just having got involved in utilizing the gym and all the people that have been coming to use it, my antenna's gone up as far as being more involved in what's going to happen to this building. I'm certainly hoping that it will get taken care of, whether it's torn down and rebuilt, or I don't know really. I've just heard rumblings. I don't really know that much about what's going on, to tell you the truth. I also would love to be involved in any of those decisions, because I think it's a fabulous outlet for people who, as she said, don't belong to clubs, that would like to get involved in some kind of exercise. I think it's utilized in a very positive way for our town. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Pickleball is the new sport. Thank you. I've been fascinated by what that is, and now I know the.
Happy, but I would probably talk about another hour. I would be happy to answer any questions about it.
Just as a point of information for the audience, the specific subject of the Civic Center has been before the town now almost going on 2 decades, 1997. The commissioner was good enough to take her time to outline for me all the various steps that have occurred since that time. It is transcended 5 different administrations in the selectman's office, and you can see from it there has been 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The fact is we are at that critical juncture as we know that it exists, it's functioning, but it's on life support. So it will be a discussion, as we know there was money appropriated in the current fiscal year to begin a facility design. Just to give you some of the context of what's being considered, it would be to replace the existing 2-story, 32,467 square foot building with a new single-story, approximately 35,000 square foot structure. The new building would have an 8,285 square foot gym, exhibition space, and a separate 5,475 square foot assembly meeting room. 3 smaller 1,050 square foot individual purpose meeting rooms would serve as smaller venues. A central lobby with restrooms serves all spaces. Business, office, recreational storage, and exterior accessible field restrooms are included. And it denotes what all the limitations are. Again, this is based on the funding that was received this year that allowed to do approximately 30% design, and is built off of a cumulative record of input on the part of several groups that have looked at this. Mr. Porter was the leader of one of them, so certainly, and Ms. Pisani, you were part of a group. I remember being in meetings, Mr. Rafferty. So to give you the issue context, we're at the decision point in terms of we've made an investment to get back something. We're taking it to the full design. Then the community, through the BET and the RTM, will decide whether it's one of those projects that I noted here that we're planting the seed that they want to water and blossom into completion in the future. Okay, and pardon me if I mispronounce a name. I endeavor to try to be as accurate as I can. Okay, Dawn Papelian.
Thank you very much, and you said it correctly.
You know, he whispered in my ear.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I was chair of the Greenwich Skate Park for the Junior League of Greenwich for 4 years, and was very proud, not only as a member of the Junior League, but a member of the community, to open the Greenwich Skate Park in April 2003. In the last few years, I've noticed that the park is under disrepair and needs a total upgrade. And I'm happy to hear that it's in the works for a renovation, and I respectfully request that you take it under great consideration to provide the funding for the renovation, because it brings so much happiness, joy, safe environment for the children of our town. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Robert Davis, Mill Pond Dredging.
Good evening. I'm here this evening as a director of the Coscob Association to represent that organization and the citizens of Coscob. I'd like to reference a docket, actually a town document. It's the 2014 Coscob Neighborhood Plan. And under the category of 5 top priorities for action on the Coscob Neighborhood Plan, number 1A is Mill Pond dredging. I'm not going to take time to make an impassioned speech about the mill pond. I know many of you, since you live in Coscob, you're familiar with the mill pond. I would like to just make the comment that I've been in that area about 20 years, and every year it only gets worse. So this is a problem that's just continuing to mount, and every year that it goes by, it's going to be a bigger and bigger problem. One of my elderly neighbors a number of years ago, just to give you a concept of how much it's changed, says that in the 50s or 60s, people actually had sunfishes on the pond and also did water skiing, if you can imagine that. And in the same report that I referred to, the mill pond is referred to as the jewel of Coscob. And I think all of you would agree, if you've gone by there at low tide, it's not much of a jewel. So I think it is something that should be addressed. It's not a concept that's unfamiliar to the town. Binney Park Pond was dredged in '97 or '98. My understanding that it's going to be dredged again in the next year or two. So I'm here this evening to make a formal request that the dredging of the mill pond be added to your capital improvement program. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Martin Blanco for the Greenwich Skate Park.
Good evening. I'm the director / coordinator of the skate park, and I'm here just to inform of certain things. First of all, I'd like to thank the Junior League for helping us 12 years ago. The skate park, as I'm there all the time, and I can use Mr. Tessie as an example of his kids, fun to have there. We keep them entertained as much as possible. We are a safe environment because I teach the boys that I have as my staff to watch the kids every move they make, not escape. But in the years, I've been there since opening, and I started out as the assistant director. Now I'm the director 3 years, and the ramps and obstacles have gotten to wear and tear because of age, weather, especially the snow last year, where we have considered options to improvement in the end. The best one is to just upgrade, which is a choice that through Frank Gabriel, we chose a company who will save us money because we don't have to dig out the hole or anything. We can actually build on top of what's there now and just get rid of the ramps and give them to another skate park to enjoy. So I'm just here just to try to tell you guys that I've been there for 12 years with many generations of kids who I've actually been glad to hire after seeing them skateboard since they were 6 years old. Right now I have like 6 staff that started out there when they were like 6 or 7 years old, who the sooner they turn 13, 14 years old, I take them in as a CITs, and then the next year I hire them to replace the college-bound kids. And fortunately, I've had a bunch of kids that actually turned out to be great kids, college kids. I have a few that are actually teachers in the Western Middle School. I actually have one back here who's shot, but has been around for quite a while, and is one of the kids that will come in and help me teach the kids how to skateboard. So I'm just here to say that let's give it a chance for the future generations to keep them off Greenwich Avenue and other public places by offering the kids and the newer generation a place to skate. Thank you very much. Good
Great,
night.
thank you very much. I just wanted to note, for those who didn't have an opportunity to look at the project sheet for this, it is a requested allocation of $200,000. However, $100,000 of that request is going to be covered through the skate park revenue reserve account. So while it still has to be appropriated, we're giving you the full context of where the dollars are coming from. So those monies currently exist. So essentially, this is $100,000, $100,000 request to the taxpayer in the 16-17 year. Joe Solari, and Joe is going to talk to us about fiscal responsibility.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Joe.
So I just joined the RTM and new to how all this works here. I'm not surprised to see a lot of folks coming in to advocate spending other people's money on their different projects of interest to them. That's kind of how this town government works in most parts of the country. Not as much in Texas, but certainly in the Northeast. You know, Connecticut used to be one of the richest states in our country, and yet we morphed into one of the worst performing economies in America. You know, we just recently lost GE as a corporate tenant of Connecticut. They left Fairfield for Boston, and it's another sad marker in the downhill slide brought about by Connecticut's high tax, high regulation, and overspending policies of the past 25 years. We now rank 4th among states in outbound residents. We're still behind New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, but adjusted for population, we are number 1. I think we're last right now for Tax Freedom Day. It's May 1st.
Joe, if you could talk to us, because
Sure.
as nice as you want to talk to but you're not going to get picked up
Sure.
on.
We taxpayers are doing our part, and plenty of it. But there's little capacity to draw more milk from this cow. And our economy is a laggard, and more folks are leaving. What does this have to do with Greenwich and our town budget? A lot, actually. You know, we've been, as is Fairfield County, the piggy bank for the state to take money from one group and give to others who will vote for those folks in government. That, as the state continues to get deeper and deeper in debt, they're going to be taking more and more money from us. So hopefully, we'll have built up a strong, like the squirrel, you know, with the nuts, we've built up a strong cachet to preserve us in those downtimes. Now, I heard recently that 2% a year budget increases make a lot of sense, and that's great because it moderates it. Peter, I understand where that comes from. But why are we spending more money than we take in on things that really aren't a government's responsibility at all? Over the last decade, the town has increased its debt. If existing plans are implemented, debt levels would continue to go higher. I don't think many understand the declining state of the town's financials, in large part because many of those involved have an incentive to kind of move those details under the rug. And there's not much competition in town. If you're a Republican, you have to just spend a little bit less than the Democrats, it seems. And while folks like Peter and others are fighting the good fight, I feel like we're on a slow trend downwards. Now, again, going back to the town budget, the RTM, why I joined it is because we approve all expenditures over $5,000. And when I see the RTM and the BET and others continuing to advocate for more spending and increased budgets, it's a little bit concerning for the future of our town, let alone our state. So, in closing, I think we really need all of us who have an interest in our town and in public service to try and work really hard to truly innovate and reduce the spending on employees, either through lower labor contracts, through less benefits, an employee paying the freight as the private sector does, reducing headcount, or outsourcing and getting rid of units altogether. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. Next speaker, Will Rogers on the sidewalk on Oval Avenue.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Peter, and fellow committee members. I'm here I'm speaking for a number of our neighbors on the north side of Summit and Oval Avenue who are going to be impacted by the proposed school sidewalk project. And I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak up, because a lot of us felt we haven't had an opportunity to voice our opposition to the project. We feel that sidewalk is not necessary. The survey that was used originally for this project, we think those who've looked at it that it's flawed and dated. We feel that our neighborhood is a safe one already, and there has not been any pedestrian car accidents. And, we're happy to reallocate those funds to more needy neighborhoods in use that need sidewalks. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we hope that our feelings are taken into consideration. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Alan Small, Northwest Greenwich Fire Station.
Thank you very much. I'm Alan Small. I'm RTM member from District 10. I'm also on the board of the Northwest Greenwich Association. Just wanted to thank you for ranking the King Street Fire Station #1 project, as that's a life safety issue that is very important to the town, and we continue to advocate for this. It's been a long period of time coming, and we really appreciate moving that forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Alan. Help me out with this one. I'm trying to read it. Is it Ingrid? Ingrid Wynn?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry.
That's okay, it's all right.
I didn't
Sorry.
bring my glasses, sorry.
Well, I think what you've already explained. I'm representing the Old Greenwich Riverside Community Centre, talking about the Eastern Greenwich Civic Centre. I'm also a Riverside resident, and the OGRCC has occupied space at the Civic Centre for over 20 years and has seen the good and the bad. I feel that the Civic Centre should be the centre of the community and should be able to sustain community programs and be a meeting place for the members of the community. I think the Greenwich community would appreciate a more modern and usable building to accommodate more programs and groups which encompass what community is. The OGRCC have had to limit its programs because of the lack of appropriate space. And as Vin DeMarco said, many real estate agents relish on the ability to be able to show off some of their open spaces and buildings. So I'm hoping that the Eastern Greenwich Civic Centre will become something that we can show off to our Greenwich, future Greenwich residents as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Ingrid. Candace Garthwaite, Stormwater Management and Drainage.
Good evening, and if I could just ask one question on the Eastern Civic Center. Will there be an opportunity for public input on the design?
Well, we've had
To turn your microphone on.
Or perhaps I've missed it. I just know that
No.
question came up,
You
so.
may have, but we're going to be working the project in-house, and then we're going to be adding specific groups that have been asked to have input into it. So at some point, I'm not sure we're going to have a big, broad-based relook again, but there'll be some other groups that have been very active in the planning phase to be brought back into the plan to see whether we get it right and the initiatives that would have been discussed are in the plan. So if you have some information, you can send it to me. There are other people in the room, Julie Pisani, there's some
Right,
other folks
right.
here.
David.
That are all, Dave Rafferty, they're all kind of people
Okay,
that we've been
all right.
talking to for a while. So.
All right, great. So thank you for that. It's exciting to see that is to be a reality. I'm here to speak to, as I have numerous times, on stormwater and managing it and investing in the infrastructure. And I, again, thank you for what has been allocated, the progress that looks like is going to be made on the top projects, those that were ranked as per the safety qualification, and that's good to see. From what I can tell, that's about $50 million or thereabouts. It is kind of spread around the budget, so it's hard to assess. I would, though, like to see or understand better how the remainder of the projects are being looked at. What are the criteria now, and have things changed? Storm water and flooding is not only a safety risk, it's a risk to our town's economy, a risk to our real estate, and I don't know if we all agree in this room that certainly flooding is something that's not going to go away and potentially could get a lot worse. So I would like to understand how those projects are going to be evaluated, reprioritized, and if there are some creative ways that we could look at to get more funding towards the stormwater infrastructure. I think nationwide, it's difficult, not only just in Greenwich, to invest in infrastructure. It's underground, it's out of sight, but in the end, it has to do with our safety, our quality of life, and really a protection of our businesses and our homes. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Candace. Those are the names, at least on this sheet. Perhaps there are more on the one that Ben is. Thanks, Ben. Michael Janicki, referencing the skate park.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to make the very important point that the upgrade will be turning it to concrete, so it will essentially minimize the maintenance costs for the future years. It'll definitely be way less than what the wood that it is right now, and the design and construction of it should be punctual, because if it falls into the winter, it'll only create problems that will compound the costs to fix it. So, yeah, I just wanted to make those quick points. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. Yes, if you come forward. If you could just tell us your name since
Yeah, absolutely.
Please.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Kavanaugh. Like my neighbor William Rogers, I'm here to voice opposition to the Oval Avenue sidewalk project. We were able to contact a good number of our neighbors on the north side of the street who do feel that the project is unnecessary. The narrowing of the road, the destruction of perfectly healthy trees, creating this bottleneck along a major roadway where delivery trucks, landscaping vehicles will end up causing a great deal of traffic, and a danger to my teenagers who will have to ride their bikes on this narrow road in the future is just completely unnecessary when we have this wide, nice shoulder that produces safety for them at this time. I feel that the survey that went out was totally flawed. A lot of the people also feel that they were not delivered the communication effectively. In fact, I spoke to one homeowner who rents her property. She had no idea about the project. She had no idea that she was able to say yes or no to the project, and was very startled at the idea of her property being destructed by a large sidewalk being installed. So we really hope that you'll consider that. There was a petition sent to Mr. Michael, and he promised that he would consider it, and we have not heard anything from him, so we'd really appreciate some information back in the future.
I'm just going to comment on, in terms of who actually gets the survey, I believe
That's who we try to
Yeah.
reach. That's what we have to use the information that we have.
So
Yeah.
the survey goes to the underlying property owner. So if someone rents, they're not going to be accorded the same right as someone who actually owns the property of which the project's going to impact. So
Right, but if unless there's something that specifically says, please give this to the homeowner, these people might be inclined to just put it in the recycle bin or garbage, so. And the other thing was, in this study, the question was, do you want a sidewalk, yes or no? Would you want a sidewalk on the other side of the street? And most people we talked to said, of course we want a sidewalk on the other side of the street. And I just don't understand how that's a fair argument. I just don't. So.
Right. Well, it's taken into consideration. Certainly, this isn't the first time that this type of situation has arisen. And again, a lot of thought will go into whether or not the project goes forward. But there was a whole extensive pedestrian safety analysis several years ago. We spent money on it because there was just this more anecdotal, emotional argument for sidewalks, and we decided that was not the soundest methodology for making the determination. The committee had representation from all corners of the town. In any reference to that report, that's the report that was developed by this outside firm after at least 4, perhaps 6 meetings throughout the town, and I think it lists all the people who came. But there's no question it's one of these type of things that there are people who want it, and there are people who recognize that it's going to change the character of their neighborhood and perhaps, and I underscore perhaps, create other issues for which they don't have now, for which you highlight. So that all goes into the judgment that is made. So Mr. Michael likely will forward those petitions to me, and I will ultimately be sharing them with the BET Budget Committee because they will be reviewing all of this when they meet in the early weeks of February.
Okay. And I think it's also important to note that when you're looking at where the sidewalk is going to be built on the north side, you are causing then this unnecessary danger for children who will then have to cross the street. And I brought up with Mr. Michael this whole idea of blind spots and curves and hills along Summit and Oval Avenue with no obvious place to put a crosswalk. And he said that still hadn't been determined, but I still can't even imagine where those crosswalks will be put. If you were to drive up that particular road going from the train station into Old Greenwich, there's no way you could fathom where to put a crosswalk safely. So making those children move to the other side of the street makes no sense at all. They're so much safer walking in a shoulder that is clearly marked on the side of the road that they're on at the moment. And the other thing, too, is having a sidewalk connecting from the train station all the way to the Circle in Old Greenwich. There's this wall at the parking lot at the train station in Riverside, the retaining wall. How do you build a sidewalk when there's no shoulder next to a retaining wall? It makes no sense to me. That seems like an unnecessarily large expense. When, by the way, there is a sidewalk on the other side of the street coming from the train station and another retaining wall that they'd have to do something with on the other side. So there's a lot to consider here that I think was not really taken into consideration when they laid this project out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sure. Mr. DeChapel. Good evening, welcome.
Great memory for names. I'm on the Public Works Committee of the RTM. Just as briefly as I can, there are so many good things in here that we want to do, but obviously we can't do them because if you raise taxes anywhere approaching 3%, we get a revolution. So the way we should have a meeting or some discussion as to what is it that we can cut. Amy mentioned that, for instance, leaf collection. If we can get away with that, there's a good saving there. But that's just an example. Anyway, I just wanted to bring on some thoughts as to where can we cut in the general budget at some point so that we have more room to put some of these things into practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, those are all considerations that take place. We had a good meeting today with the representatives of the Budget Overview Committee of the RTM, and to share with you just in concept that the way we look at our information certainly is a prescribed process that has been used and refined over the course of many decades. It ties into our accounting system, it ties into our organizational structure, but clearly, looking at things in totality in terms of total costs, inclusive of total compensation, insurance costs, which is essentially a program-based budget, is one thing that we think we can provide in simplicity. And their request was in simplicity, just having a document that looks at recreation and says recreation broken out, inclusive of all those attributes, extensions, is X million dollars, so that you see it in totality, and then value judgments can be made by the decision makers. So it's certainly something that we're receptive to. It does take time and resource to do it, but it can be done. And I think, again, the conversation was very productive, to your point, Mr. DeChapel, then to say, what is that particular service and program mean in the context of the overall public works budget, and what are the implications if we don't do it as it relates to the stormwater, because then the leaves wind up in the drains and we have to clean the drains because the state's mandating us to now do more stormwater management due to mandates. So it's a good point, though, and we welcome it. Ms. Gleason, thanks. Mrs. Gleason.
Mr. Tessie. I don't have any prepared notes. I'm not really good at this. I'm going to talk to you as if you were a skating father that I see you at. I was not born here. I moved here when I was 5. In that time, I've been a camper at Camp Carefree, a camp counselor at Camp Carefree, roller skating at the Civic Center. My mom has taken activity classes at the Civic Center, and I'm calling it Civic Center because I predate Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. The old Greenwich Riverside Community Center, when I was little, was housed in La Fat Poodle. So let's just, Mr. DeChapel knows because, yes. I just want to speak in advocate of redoing, supporting Billy Schock, doing the whole, it's a wonderful project. Please keep it in.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. Is there anyone else? Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
Haven't seen you in a while.
No,
Nice
you
to see
haven't. Susan Foster. I don't have prepared remarks either. I want to support what she just said, but also I'm sorry I wasn't here to see the presentation, so I'm not sure if something I'm going to say was already covered, and I apologize if that's the case. My concern, I would like to see the OGRCC is what I refer to it, but the Eastern Civic Center completely redone. I think it should have been done decades ago. But my issue is, are the fields there? I don't know if that's part of the plan, but it needs to be part of the plan. And that I ask that the town really start looking at active recreation with every public building that goes up. It should be part of the initial planning. So I was extremely disappointed to read in the newspaper, and I hope it just wasn't true, that with New Lebanon, that there wasn't thought about putting in a regulation-sized field with the construction of the new building. It just seems to me this needs to go hand in hand. We don't have enough active recreational space in the town of Greenwich. There's competing interest all over the place, and it just seems like if we're going to do a project, active recreation should be incumbent as an inherent part of the process from the get-go. And then just one aside, I don't know if this is a part of the budget considerations, but there's talk about putting turf fields in at the 3 middle schools. This was floated out there a decade or so ago before. I just want to say that I'm extremely opposed to it for Eastern Middle School. I know a lot about turf fields. I was on the athletic council at the high school when we advocated turf fields at the high school. It was an appropriate application there. It is an inappropriate application for Eastern Middle School. I can't speak to Western or Central. I mean, I know a little bit about their field situations, and I think it might be appropriate. It's just not appropriate at Eastern. Eastern has a small wet area on one end of a field. That's it. Grass fields are the gold standard of field sports. You want kids on grass when you can. OGRCC, Eastern Civic Center, is a perfect place for turf fields. So if we're going to put money in turf in the town, the place to do it, and the place to do it first, and it needed to be done 2 decades ago, is the Civic Center. I mean, those fields are flooded all the time. Eastern is not flooded all the time. One tiny little section that could be fixed very easily. But anyway, the only green space in Riverside are the 2 schools. And frankly, there's not much green space left at Riverside School. So Eastern Middle School is a de facto park for the people who live in Riverside. We put turf in there. It's going to need to be fenced. So we'll lose all that green space because you can't leave turf fields not fenced, because you can't have Gatorade and dogs on them. So they have to be fenced. They're very expensive. They're at least $1 million to construct. So we would be taking the only open green space in Riverside, putting turf down that would only be used for limited periods of time, and put a fence around it. So I urge that this just gets taken off the table from the get-go, because I think once the community really wakes up to the idea that this could possibly be turfed over, there will be really major blowback out of Riverside on this, because it's where people take their dogs for walks and play with frisbees, and it's literally the only open park space that we have. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just to give context to this issue in sort of looking at where it came from, the Parks and Rec area has an advisory committee, a board of Parks and Rec, and they've done considerable work, and I applaud them in that they've become truly what they were set up to do, is be advisory to the Office of the First Selectman. So in a whole sphere of areas in recreation, they raised this as a opportunity last year in the budget process. It was not included in the First Selectman's budget, rather a proposal to seek feasibility funding for doing the stadium over at Greenwich High School was. It was done because there's considerable interest on the part of private stakeholders to support it. When the matter went to the BET, members of the BET were aware of this need as it was identified by the parks and thought it would perhaps provide greater bang for the buck to do that. So just so we understand where the subject originated from, how it's been perceived. Now that's of course all subject to, again, a whole new BET and so forth, but, oh sure. But I just wanted to give you context if you weren't
but
here.
I just think it's, a waste of time, and once people dig in, they'll realize it won't go anywhere because it will be, for so many reasons. But the other thing I just want to say, a lot of people don't know this. When the stadium was done the last time at the high school, the track and field people were not well represented there, right? And so the football people were there, and of course the football people wanted a certain type of turf, the ideal length for them. And the parties in the room were all focused on football. But the fact of the matter is, we put a very expensive track around that football field. And the track was done not, to me it's almost kind of unbelievable this occurred. It wasn't done metric. It was done in feet. And because of that, the track can't be used for a lot of kinds of meets. Okay? So I really urge the town to always put a professional person who knows the true construction of athletic fields, how they're supposed to be built and the size that they're supposed to be built. We could have been we could have had so many track events there. We could have been the site for track for Fairfield County if the right thing had been built there. And it could have been built there very, very easily. It was the blasting of a couple more rocks. That was it. Just a little bit bigger. It's just really sad. So I go back to the original thing. It's like I think every time we do a construction project, someone who knows active recreation, a professional, needs to be, someone in town. I'm sure there's people who can volunteer that can tell the town what the standards are so that we get it right, as far as regulation size fields and regulation size tracks and what the surfaces should be.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully we've learned a lot since the 1950s and 60s when I think that was conceived. Anybody else? Don? And then
I just have excuse me, John, go.
by the way, Mr. Conway is the man behind the community television.
I gotta get
He's
back
like
to
the
the
Wizard of
booth.
Oz.
I have to bring up the old nemesis that I've been campaigning for years for. And Amy, it falls into your area. Streets and highways, the markers down the center of the various roads like North Street, Lake Avenue, you name them. As one lady said earlier, some of these streets around town twist and turn up and down and all over. The paint that we're using doesn't reflect anything, any kind of light when you go after about 7 o'clock at night in the dusk or 4 o'clock now. If there's any rain on the ground, forget about it. You don't even see anything. And in very few of these streets, there are very few white lines on the side showing where the road is ending and the grass and the walls are beginning. I hope people drive slow, but by the same token, some that don't or some may not be that whatever, they miss We've lost a few people in town here, as you know, over the years. We don't want to lose any more. They don't cost that much. I know they're put in all over the Midwest, out west, up north. It doesn't interfere with the plows, and they're fairly easy to put in and not that expensive. And certainly, if it saves a life, it's well worth it. So please look into doing some of those, even a pilot program, and see what people think about it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Don. Mr. Porter?
My name is Irv Porter from District 12. I just have a clarification question. You had two people tonight that appeared with regard to sidewalks in the Riverside area. My scorecard suggests that that specific project would be under the annual new sidewalk program. Is that
That is correct.
And there's specific reference to that part of the sidewalk program. Can you give me a gut check feel as to how much of the proposed $800,000 would be applicable to that area? It's really the entire project, isn't it?
Just about.
Okay. So that was the first question. And second, just my own scorecard, as we looked at the 25, let's call it discretionary projects out of the well over 100 that are in the CIP book. There's been testimony tonight, as I count it, for about 5 projects out of those 25. Can you comment as to whether or not there will be other speakers or another way to elicit public comment with regard to those? How do we do that?
Well, I think by their very nature, certain projects don't have a constituency. So in terms of the library's requests for digitizing the entire Greenwich time, which one could classify as the paper record from the 19th century forward, perhaps maybe not the case today with the digital era, but that's something that we have to depend upon the information and make a judgment as to the value it has to the community as a historical reference. Things like the Learning Commons, as was pointed out in the meeting you were in, I think, last week, has a corresponding impact to the programming that the schools are trying to do with the digital learning and science, technology, engineering, and math. So again, we have to balance it out. I think this was designed to be one component of evaluation. The other obviously depends upon the judgment and subjectivity of all these various stakeholders who are here based upon their professional acumen and sphere of responsibility, and listening to them. And that's certainly something I take into consideration. In fact, I think Mrs. Moriarty, you pointed that out last time, which was a valid point about that particular project in thinking of it in that way. So
That's exactly what I was hoping you would comment on, so that those that are in the room tonight, when they come back and see what the ultimate budget is, if for some reason their cause, their special program, or opposition to a specific program hasn't been dealt with, they still understand that there are other ways that they can get input in as the process evolves, including showing up at the public meeting that the BET has on the budget. If there are others besides that I know of that are public, I think it would be useful for this group to raise that. That was my thought. Thank you.
A very valid point. I mean, I'm just trying to select another one, but I'll do this one. I think people can relate to, although no one has spoken to it specifically tonight, but the school zone traffic control, the Board of Selectmen as the town's traffic authority routinely deals with requests for speed control devices. The Department of Public Works, through its traffic engineering, has looked at it holistically and has made uniform standards within all of our school zones, both public and private. And in many respects, it's there to ensure safety of the students coming in and out, the automobiles. And so that particular item, while no one's spoken to it, we hear about cumulatively throughout the year. And whether they come into our office or they go direct to them. So to Mr. Porter's point, yes, the rating is an integral part, but it's not the sole arbiter in determining what goes forward. There is always going to be an element of subjectivity and discretion by virtue of this is a process run by human beings, not machines. And so they're the element of it. Yes, you've been very patient, so please.
More of a question then. In regards to Vinny, he mentioned it also about the Army Corps of Engineers for the Byram River. Where does that stand? Because I'm listening to the Binney Park dredging, the Mill Pond dredging, and then reading about the Arch Street Ferry dock dredging. And that's a federal, because that has to deal with Long Island Sound. Where's the Army Corps of Engineers, and when will we know what their decisions are about the Byram River? Because my feeling still is just we just need to dredge one part of the Byram River to get it flowing down by Putnam.
Actually, so far, the Army Corps is working to come up with their report for us in 2016. We're
how
trying to
many
get a more
reports?
specific, we're trying to get some more specific dates out of them. But what they have already presented is that dredging is not a solution for flooding on the Byram River. So I don't know if you've gone to some of the prior.
Yes, I've gone to all the meetings.
Prior
However,
meetings. So they've presented that pretty clearly there. They're doing a great deal of work at this point in time to look at the non-structural solutions. They're looking at the Route 1 bridge and its impact
'Cause
on
that,
those
I
types
think,
of solutions.
that Route
And they
1
have to go
bridge.
through a very detailed process. They're subject to a great deal of regulation because, of course, they're spending federal tax dollars to do that work. So all I'm just trying to say is it's a long process. They're going through all that to
expensive
look at
process.
their cost-benefit analysis right now on those alternatives under different storm conditions. And when we get more of that information from them, we want to get them to come back and present that to the folks in the neighborhood and then continue moving that process on.
is there a point where you say, thank you, see you, because it's so much money has been spent on that?
Well, what we want to do is we want to get to the end of the study,
Right.
where again, we have something that we can make a decision on. And we can't make a decision on anything yet until they come to us and say, well, this is the most economically preferred solution based on the criteria that they have to meet. Here's what the government would be willing and ready, able to fund. So we want to go through that process, and that's something that we think is worth getting to that point.
Did you have to go through that with the Arch Street? Since that's federal, that's Long Island Sound, that's
I'm not quite sure what you...
No, the dredging by the Arch Street dock.
Okay, that's a different project, yeah.
No, I know, but but it's dredging
similar.
and it's a federal, it's
Similar.
similar idea.
It's a similar
of
idea, the evaluation, the permitting process, and where it really sits in the funding mechanism for whether it's a town-funded project, if the town wishes to take it on, whether it's a combination of the town and the federal government, or whether the federal government will pay for it in its entirety. So those are the kind of things that are going to happen at the Arch Street. We're just trying to do the sampling and the sediment analysis and the quantities that need to be dredged to get us to where we need to, where it becomes, more usable and back to its normal state of that it was dredged to. But all of that other funding, the funding mechanisms are really determined on the cost and the need, and it stacks up at the federal level with all projects that are done in New England, if the feds fund it. If the town and the feds partner, it gives it a little bit more, there's a little bit more input, and it gets a little bit more attention because it's not all federal funding. And if the town funds it all by itself, the feds would say, thank you very much, and move on to another project. So that's how it kind of works.
May I ask a question, because maybe this is really what we're talking about here. There is a difference, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Army Corps study the Army Corps project, the one that they're involved in with the Byron River, is really a stormwater issue. It's a flooding issue.
It's a flooding issue.
Where
right?
the
Flooding
where the Arch Street dock, that's not a flooding issue. It's a recreational or a waterway issue. Am I correct? So to Ava's point, okay, she made the point that is dredging, or she may have been making the point that dredging would perhaps help the flooding issue. Perhaps not. Perhaps the Army Corps feels it wouldn't make any difference there. But there's a usage issue also with the Byron River, not part of that study, where it can't be used. Somebody mentioned earlier that somewhere, wherever it was, we were talking about the mill pond, I guess, being the use of the mill pond was much greater. And I assume that's the same issue, a usage issue, not a flooding issue, the dredging of the mill pond. So I think that once the Army Corps study is finished, and as far as flooding issues go, then we can talk about perhaps the other usage issue that.
I mean, my point is, I'm new to the area. I think it's such a beautiful river. It's such a beautiful, and it's just kind of forgotten. The trees fall in it. My husband and I go pick up more garbage, and thank you very much for the DPW picking up hot water tanks that are just dumped down. I'm just frustrated with, how it's been kind of a forgot. I don't know. I'm only here 4 years, but I would love to see it resurrected for the beauty that it can provide for the town.
Ava, you're spelling your last name for our minutes.
Spelman, EVA.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, this will conclude the hearing for the First Selectman's Capital Improvement Projects Program Committee. But I do want to provide you information as to the next step in the process, which is on February 1st, the Superintendent of Schools and I will be presenting our budgets to the BET Budget Committee, led by Mr. Lash and again represented by Mrs. Kiernan, Mr. Raymer, Mrs. Tarkington are all here tonight. And upon our completion of those presentations, they will be having a public hearing on the budget. So you will then have an opportunity to express to them perhaps some of the same thoughts or additional thoughts which they will factor into their decision-making process. At those meetings, the remaining 8 members of the BET are there, the RTM's there, and it does play an integral part into their process. So that's on February 1st, beginning at, I believe, 6 o'clock for the presentation I will be making, 6:30 for the presentation the superintendent of schools and the chairman of the Board of Education will be making, and 7 o'clock for the hearing that will be held by the Budget Committee of the BET. And that's scheduled for downstairs in the Town Hall meeting room, and I would encourage you to attend that meeting as well. I do want to thank you for your time and attention to coming and expressing your point of view. It has an impact as to our thought processes in evaluating the decisions we have to make in the next week, and encourage you to continue to remain active in the process right through May when the RTM takes up the budget. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.